Just when many believed the British royal family had finally found a measure of stability after years of turbulence, a new wave of speculation began sweeping across the palace gates. This time, the whispers were different. They were not about ceremonies, state visits, or even the future of the crown itself. They were about power. And according to a growing number of royal commentators and newspaper reports, King Charles had quietly begun reshaping the inner workings of the monarchy in ways few people expected. At the center of those reports stood two names: Queen Camilla and Prince William. For years, Camilla had become one of the king's most trusted companions. She had supported him through public criticism, personal loss, and the difficult transition from Prince of Wales to sovereign. Her rise from one of the most controversial figures in royal history to queen was one of the monarchy's most remarkable transformations. But inside royal circles, another story was beginning to emerge. A story about a changing balance of influence. A story about a future king stepping more decisively into his role. And a story that, according to royal experts, may reveal just how rapidly the House of Windsor is preparing for the next chapter of its history. Because behind the palace walls, some observers believe that Prince William is no longer simply the heir waiting in the wings. He is becoming something else entirely. A central figure in the monarchy's future direction. And if those reports are true, then one private series of conversations may have changed the relationship between the most senior members of the royal family forever. The question is simple. Was this merely another round of royal speculation, or has the balance of power inside the monarchy already begun to shift? Hi viewers, if you were King Charles, would you trust the next generation to take on more responsibility now, or would you wait a little longer? Let everyone know in the comments below. And if you enjoy following the hidden stories and major turning points shaping the future of the monarchy, subscribe to Royal Family Series, because some of the most important royal changes happen quietly, long before the public ever sees them. The British monarchy has survived for more than 1,000 years for one reason: it adapts. Kings change, queens change, governments come and go, but the institution endures because every generation eventually faces a difficult question: who should carry the crown forward? That question has become especially important in recent years. King Charles ascended the throne during one of the most challenging periods in modern royal history. Public expectations had changed dramatically. The media cycle had become relentless. Every royal appearance, every speech, and every family disagreement could become international news within minutes. At the same time, the working royal family had become smaller, the demands had become larger, and the pressure on senior royals had only intensified. Against that backdrop, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, increasingly emerged as the public faces of the monarchy's future. Poll after poll suggested they remained among the most popular members of the royal family, and royal commentators frequently described them as the bridge between tradition and modernization. But growing responsibility can also bring new questions. Questions about authority, questions about influence, questions about who ultimately shapes the institution's future. Over the past year, royal experts have repeatedly noted that King Charles appears to be placing increasing trust in his eldest son. The Prince of Wales has taken on more international duties, more meetings, and more responsibilities that once belonged solely to the sovereign. Some saw it as simple preparation. Others believed something more significant was happening. Then came the reports that sent palace watchers into a frenzy. Several newspapers and royal commentators began discussing what they described as an evolving power structure within the monarchy. They pointed to subtle changes behind the scenes, new responsibilities, new consultations, more frequent involvement by William in matters concerning the institution's long-term future. Nothing dramatic, nothing officially announced, yet in royal circles, small changes often carry enormous meaning. Because in the monarchy, influence is rarely transferred overnight. It moves quietly. A conversation here, a meeting there, a decision that seems ordinary at first, until suddenly everyone realizes that something fundamental has changed. And according to some commentators, that realization may have already begun. Because while the public continued to focus on ceremonies and appearances, reports suggested that private discussions inside royal residences had become increasingly focused on one issue: the future. Not next year, not even the next decade, the future of the monarchy itself. Who would guide it? Who would protect it? And who would have the strongest voice when difficult decisions had to be made? Those questions were reportedly becoming harder to ignore, especially as Prince William's role continued to expand. But then something happened that caused even experienced royal observers to take notice. A series of private meetings reportedly began raising new questions about influence inside the palace. Questions that would soon lead to an extraordinary new wave of speculation. And according to those following every development inside the House of Windsor, this was only the beginning. As those reports continued to circulate, attention increasingly turned toward one undeniable reality. The monarchy was changing. Not dramatically, not publicly, but steadily. King Charles had always spoken about a streamlined monarchy, one that would rely on a smaller group of senior working royals carrying out the institution's most important duties. It was a vision he had discussed long before becoming king, and after ascending the throne, there were signs that he intended to put that vision into practice. At the same time, the Prince and Princess of Wales found themselves taking on a larger and larger share of royal responsibilities. There were overseas tours, diplomatic meetings, military appointments, high-profile initiatives on mental health, homelessness, and early childhood development. The list seemed to grow by the month. Royal commentators began noticing something else. The king was increasingly appearing beside William at major engagements and state occasions that carried deep constitutional significance. To some observers, it looked less like routine preparation and more like a gradual transfer of experience. And in the monarchy, symbolism matters, sometimes more than words. Then came a series of newspaper reports and expert commentary suggesting that William's influence behind palace doors had expanded considerably. No official statement confirmed any dramatic shift, no palace source announced a restructuring of power. Yet the speculation persisted. Why? Because royal watchers had seen similar moments before. The late Queen Elizabeth II had slowly increased Charles's responsibilities over many years before he became king. Access, trust, and responsibility had all expanded long before any official transition took place. Was history repeating itself? That question suddenly became impossible to ignore. Some commentators suggested that King Charles, mindful of both the demands of the crown and the need for long-term stability, may have begun relying more heavily on his heir in matters concerning the monarchy's future direction. Others argued that such a shift was perfectly natural. After all, the Prince of Wales is the future king. Preparing him for that role is not unusual. But then another layer of intrigue emerged. Reports began focusing on Queen Camilla's role within the institution. Camilla had become one of the king's most trusted advisors and companions. Throughout the difficult years leading to the throne, she remained at his side, and many royal experts noted the significant support she provided behind the scenes. Yet the modern monarchy is also an institution built upon constitutional boundaries. Certain responsibilities belong to the sovereign, others belong to advisors, and future planning inevitably involves the heir. As public discussion intensified, some commentators began asking whether the king's increasing reliance on William meant that the next generation was being given a stronger voice in shaping royal priorities. The headlines became more dramatic, the theories became more ambitious, and then came the suggestion that left palace watchers stunned. According to several royal observers, private discussions within senior royal circles may have focused on how the monarchy should evolve during the coming decades and who should take the lead in managing that transition. Again, there was no official confirmation, but the conversation itself revealed something important. The public had begun to see Prince William differently, not simply as the future king, but as an active participant in the monarchy's present. Then came reports that William had become increasingly involved in discussions about long-term strategy, institutional priorities, and the future direction of royal projects. Small details, quiet developments, yet together they painted a fascinating picture. A future monarch stepping forward, a reigning monarch preparing for tomorrow, and an institution adapting once again. Then, according to several royal observers, one private conversation reportedly changed the atmosphere entirely, because it was said that William raised questions that went far beyond ceremonies and public appearances. Questions about sustainability, questions about public trust, questions about the future survival of the monarchy itself. And according to those reports, the room suddenly fell silent, because the conversation was no longer about titles, it was about legacy. For years, Prince William has spoken publicly about wanting the monarchy to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. His interviews have often reflected a practical and modern approach to royal service. He has emphasized impact, measurable outcomes, and connecting with younger generations in ways previous eras of the monarchy could never have imagined. This was not a new philosophy, but it was becoming increasingly important, because every monarchy eventually faces the same challenge: adapt or risk becoming disconnected. Royal experts have frequently noted that William's approach appears focused on long-term stability. He has often spoken about projects that create lasting change rather than short-term publicity. The same philosophy has shaped many of Catherine's initiatives as well. Together, they have projected an image of careful planning and continuity, and according to widespread commentary, those qualities have made them central figures in discussions about the future of the institution. Then came the reports that sparked a new wave of fascination. Several commentators suggested that William had presented a compelling vision for how the monarchy could navigate the decades ahead, not by abandoning tradition, but by protecting it through modernization. The idea resonated with many observers because the crown has survived precisely by evolving. The Victorian monarchy looked different from the Georgian monarchy. The Elizabethan era looked different from the world that came before it. And now another transition seemed to be unfolding. According to reports, William's focus centered on ensuring that royal responsibilities remained effective, transparent, and closely aligned with public expectations. These discussions were said to involve difficult questions. How should royal duties evolve? How should future generations be prepared? How could the institution maintain public confidence during a time of enormous social change? No simple answers existed, but the questions themselves carried enormous weight, because they touched upon the very foundations of the monarchy. Royal experts began describing William's growing influence as one of the most significant developments of King Charles's reign. Some even argued that the Prince of Wales had emerged as a key architect of the monarchy's future direction. Others cautioned against reading too much into private discussions. Still, one fact remained impossible to ignore. William's responsibilities continued to grow, and so did expectations. Meanwhile, public fascination with the relationship between Charles, Camilla, and William intensified. Every appearance was analyzed, every photograph examined, every report debated. Was there tension? Was there simply a normal transition of responsibilities? Or was something more profound taking place behind palace walls? Nobody outside the inner circle could know with certainty. Yet one thing seemed increasingly clear. The next generation was moving closer to the center of royal decision-making. Then came another extraordinary twist. Several royal commentators suggested that King Charles deeply appreciated William's long-term perspective and increasingly viewed his son as an indispensable partner in guiding the monarchy through uncertain times. If true, that represented something remarkable, not a rivalry, not a struggle, but a partnership, a father and son preparing the institution for the future. And suddenly, the earlier speculation surrounding power shifts took on a different meaning entirely. Perhaps this was never about one person losing influence. Perhaps it was about another person gaining responsibility. That possibility changed everything. Because if the future king was already helping shape the monarchy's direction, then the transition to the next era had already begun, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. Then came the moment that generated headlines around the world. Commentators began openly discussing whether William's expanding role represented the most significant redistribution of influence inside the royal family in years. And once that question entered public debate, there was no putting it back. The conversation had changed, the stakes had changed, and the monarchy itself appeared to be entering a new chapter. As those discussions continued, attention inevitably returned to King Charles. Throughout his life, Charles has often been described as a man deeply conscious of history and duty. He spent more than 70 decades preparing for the throne, longer than any heir in British history. He understands continuity, he understands transition, perhaps more than anyone. Royal historians have frequently pointed out that monarchies survive when each generation carefully prepares the next. That preparation can take years, sometimes decades, and increasingly observers wondered whether Charles was now engaged in precisely that process. The evidence, at least publicly, was subtle. More responsibilities for William, more visibility, more trust, more involvement. Nothing revolutionary, yet taken together, it suggested movement, forward movement. At the same time, reports describing Queen Camilla's changing role became more nuanced. Many experts noted that her position as queen remained secure and important, but discussions about the institution's future naturally placed greater attention on the heir and his family. It was a matter of constitutional reality. The monarchy is always preparing for tomorrow, and tomorrow, eventually, belongs to William. That realization seemed to reshape the entire public conversation. Suddenly, stories that once focused on palace intrigue became stories about succession, preparation, and the long-term future of the crown. Then came another remarkable observation from royal commentators. The Prince and Princess of Wales were increasingly being viewed not merely as future monarchs, but as present-day leaders within the institution. That distinction mattered, because leadership often begins long before a crown is placed upon someone's head. By now, public interest reached extraordinary levels. Articles multiplied, television debates intensified, royal experts offered competing interpretations. Some believed a quiet transfer of influence was underway. Others insisted it was simply a natural evolution of responsibilities. Either way, one conclusion became difficult to escape. Prince William had become one of the most influential figures inside the monarchy, and according to many commentators, King Charles appeared entirely comfortable with that reality. In fact, some believed he welcomed it, because every parent eventually hopes to see the next generation ready to lead, ready to protect, ready to carry the burden forward. And perhaps nowhere is that burden heavier than inside the British monarchy. Then came the final revelation that brought all the speculation into focus. This story was never truly about stripping power away from anyone. It was about preparing for the future. It was about responsibility, trust, legacy, and the quiet recognition that one day, sooner or later, the Prince of Wales will become king. When that day arrives, the institution will depend upon every lesson learned during these years of transition. The House of Windsor has weathered crises before. It has endured wars, abdications, scandals, and moments of profound uncertainty. Yet it survives because it changes, carefully, gradually, generation by generation. And according to many royal observers, another of those transitions may already be unfolding before the world's eyes. Not with dramatic announcements, not with sudden declarations, but with private meetings, growing responsibilities, and the steady rise of a future king. The monarchy's story, after all, is never only about the present. It is always about what comes next. And what comes next may already be taking shape behind the palace gates. Because in the next video, the focus turns to one of the most talked about relationships inside the royal family, and the private reports that have fueled endless speculation about how Prince William and Queen Camilla truly worked together behind the scenes. One particular royal event and the body language that experts still discuss today may reveal far more than anyone realized at the time. You will not want to miss that story.